All right,
Yep.
let's do it. Time for superlatives. This is the first season with Lionel Messi, or without him, I should say, in 16 years. And it felt weird from start to finish, marred by injuries to the most promising players of the club. Just two managers, two legends of the club, that being Koeman, his time ending, and Xavi, his time just beginning. And, in total, I actually felt because of those two managers kind of breaking up what the season was, it's difficult to kind of put it all together, right? And to choose superlatives and categories based on both of their time, because there were even youngsters that we saw, teenagers that only featured under one or the other. And so to judge their appearances are to judge the manager that would have trusted them in one or two appearances. So we do have, again, a list of superlatives. We're going to jump right in. And that is the newcomer from the academy. Emile, I'm going to try my best to largely let you go first. And I think for some of these, we will have the same answer, but for others, we won't. And you have other candidates for these topics. Just spit them out there. And for those who are listening, you can tweet us or put on Instagram your own personal picks. And then for those also watching, just put it down in the comments below, your picks for all of these. So newcomer from the academy is the first category. And again, I assume that we are on the same page here.
I'd like to hear yours because I do think we have the same name, and I think you can sum it up in a way that might be just better than.
I'll sum it up in 4 letters: Gavi. It's Gavi. It's 17-year-old Gavi. I mean, I knew that he was one of those few players. Again, looking at the academy stuff, generally going all the way on to cadet A, of what I can watch, just trying to understand the names that people are looking at and caring about. Gavi has he's only 17. He was 16 when he came up, but it had been those 3 or 4 years where he was one of the few that does contribute and did excel in an age group that was 2 above his own. And those are the players. That's why Alejandro Balde is going to take a while, because he's still 18. It's going to take a while for me to get off Balde Island, just because he's been so advanced. And now he's had 2 years of injuries that have basically now put him on the same age track as the other 18-year-olds. So he's always been advanced and ahead. And again, he's still just 18. So for Gavi, just to be that young and to be a starter, just a consummate starter. He was 3rd on the team in appearances this year with 46. So he was part of the backbone of this team. And while he did only score 2 goals, it's something you hope that he improves upon, especially if Xavi is going to play high interiors. He's going to expect him to score a few more goals like we've seen Pedri do this year. But he was able, I have to say, to take his reckless cards and settle those down quite a bit. And, it's telling that he was an instant starter under 2 different managers this year. That is telling that he never lost his spot at all. But it wasn't just Gavi. He wasn't the only pick here. I mean, Nico Gonzalez as well. And then remember Azabde and Ferran Dugla, who is off to Belgium now for around 6 million, also featured quite a few times under Koeman, as well as a quick cup of coffee for Miko Marmol, Ilya Shikomash, Estanis Pedrola, remember him, the team winger, and Alfaro Sanz. And then at the A-League All-Stars, we were able to see Barca B's Antonio Aranda, who's 21, of course. And then Balde, as I said, Oriana, Sanz, and Tanas, they were all featuring at for the A-League All-Stars. And, not to change the category from Gavi too much, because I think we said a lot about Gavi. We'll keep talking about Gavi.
It is Gavi.
It's tough, though, honestly, though, Emile, trying to figure out, even from that pick of who I just read, Dukla is on his way out, but which of those will even get to do first team preseason with the first team? That's actually what I'm really having a hard time with. I've said for a long time that Oriana, I don't see him, even against the A-League All-Stars, comes in for the last 12 minutes against Busquets. So unless Xavi is truly saying, hey, I'm seeing what I'm seeing, Busquets is still our choice, but Oriana is going to get he's going to get the option to audition for the Busquets spot. I see him gone, actually. He's 22, so his time is very limited. Playing for Barca B in the 3rd division, that's not going to work. They finished 9th. He's also been injured for a year and a half, 2 years. And so Nico is really, the other guy there. But as I've said, I think people fairly reasonably are high enough on Marmol. He's left-footed center back who just does a job and should replace the amount of time that Umtiti and Lenglet played. And then Ilash Komash is one that, again, him still being just turning 18, it's going to take a little bit for me to be out on a player like that, especially because in the second half of this year with the U19s and Barca B, he did show you a bit of the finishing product that we expected from him. So again, these guys are improving month to month. It's not even year to year or with manager to manager or system to system. It's month to month with some of these players, or some of them can completely fall off as well. Again, Valde is the one that you circle and say, hey, if he can stay healthy, what can he do for an entire year of football? Not only first team, but football. So, all right. We don't have time to add too much of that because I'm going to give you the full runway, Emile, here for new signing, that being a transfer in.
So for transfer in, I mean, I think in a sense, this is interesting where it becomes like the two different seasons, because I think it was early in the season, I feel like Memphis was such a rock. And, because we spent so much time talking about how the team needed goal scoring and they needed people to just put the ball away. And early on, I think it was Memphis. And I think in that post-Messi period where, for better and for worse, guys were trying to find their footing, but I think there was a sense of uncharted waters without the gravity of Messi to just make everything that was going to happen. I think Memphis came in with like the requisite confidence and self-assurance, and also the pure ability to do something about it. And he scored goals early on when the team needed them. And so, I think so I think early in the season, I believe it was Memphis. My emotional choice is, as it will always and forever be, Dani Alves. And, I don't even need to, I feel like I don't even need to expand on all of the reasons there are to love Dani Alves. And I think in the latter part of the season, I think it came down to, I was tempted to say, I'm going to go with Aubameyang, but I don't know that I love it. Like my heart keeps leading me back to Dani Alves, even though I feel like, that might just be hard overhead.
Yeah, I don't know if he did exactly enough.
No, I know.
He changed everything. So, he might have changed the locker room, and that's why actually my pick is one that's going to surprise you, because it's more about the points that were won more than it was his actual his complete and total contribution. So again, this was really hard because all of these new signings based on Barca's finances seemed to, like a Marvel superhero, seemed to have a tragic flaw with each of them. They all had that thing that were keeping them from being the perfect altruist hero that we
all did good, but no one stood out completely.
Yeah. Memphis, his 13 goals, as you said, led the team, especially when they needed him the most. He played the number 9. He got them through. And by say got them through the Koeman era, he kept them in the top 10, which is important before he got hurt. Then the January signings shook everything up. So Ferran Torres, it probably isn't allowed to be the pick. Even though he did contribute so much when he showed up, he just had 6 goals and 6 assists in 25 appearances, which again, that's not enough end product to get it done to be the pick. And I'm hoping that Ferran Torres is in the long term. Obviously, he's the youngest of those signings. He's the one. He was the one for the future, as opposed to the others, along with Garcia. You have to mention. We'll have to see. But my pick, believe it or not, even though Memphis and Aubameyang with their 13 goals are why Barcelona finished second, Luke De Jong's 7 goals and extraordinary goal rate as a sub, I think maybe have the best argument for being the best signing, because he really was very much like Braithwaite before him, the break glass in case of emergency. He came in with under Koeman because of Koeman, and yet under Koeman, he won the team a few points when they shouldn't have won any points, either 1 or 3. And then still under Xavi, he still was able to win this club points that they did not deserve in matches that they did not deserve. And he was Barcelona's hero. This is not disparaging Aubameyang's goals or Memphis' goals, because when Barca were rolling, Memphis was putting them in for those 4-0s, those 4-2s. Aubameyang was putting them in when Barcelona were rolling. But when they weren't rolling, Luke De Jong was the end. And so the applause that he got from the Camp Nou tells me that he was the one that, not that they're going to miss him, because again, you don't re-sign that player, but he was the right man at the right time, enough time this year. and he saved, I believe it was a total of 8 points he saved alone with his head in the last 5 minutes of games. And that is enough for me to be the difference maker, which is incredible to say. So I already brought up.
Yeah, he's the right answer.
So I already brought up. I'm glad I convinced you. So I brought up the Ferran Torres already, and so my next category of most polarizing, unless you have a fourth, we'll say candidate here, I've got three. It's Torres, it's Frankie De Jong, and it's Eric Garcia in no particular order. I think those have to be the three because I think those are the three that I saw the most discord, the most complaining, the most arguing, and the most tribalism, if you will, about Torres, De Jong, and Garcia.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Torres, and a little bit of that is in the cases of Frankie De Jong and Eric Garcia, I mean, some of this is almost just kind of like, I don't even know, it's like a bizarro advanced stat where like it's polarizing per day with the club, because at least, Frankie De Jong and Eric Garcia had a longer time to sort of create the factions that they created. I mean, Ferran Torres only arrived in January, and like there are suddenly, there's a chasm in between the two sides of the Ferran Torres argument, and the only reason I might even say that he's not polarizing is like it just feels like everyone's out on him. I feel like there's just not even enough positivity left for him to qualify as polarizing. But it's absolutely got to be him.
Yeah, I mean, I think Eric Garcia probably didn't get the praise he should have when he had good performances. So I don't even think Eric Garcia is polarizing. I think I just really heard from those who were waiting for him to fail more than I did when he did well. I think Serginho just the same way. You don't hear when Serginho just has an okay performance. You hear when he had a bad performance. And I think there's a bunch of players in the squad that are like that. Neto, actually, I mean, goalkeepers are like this, but when Neto plays well, you don't hear it. You almost put Ter Stegen actually in that camp too. I think he would, if people want to say and argue that he is the one, because there are some that are saying, hey, you've got to replace him. And I say that, do you have the money to replace him? No, of course not. You don't have the money to replace a goalkeeper in this kind of season. So Ter Stegen, you're going to kind of be stuck with him, whether you want him or not. But on the other side of that, most polarizing also tells me that between Ferran Torres and Frankie De Jong and even Eric Garcia and Ter Stegen, there were times when those guys were heroes. There are times when they were villains. And that is what made them polarizing. My next category is most consistent. And, I tried to look up and down and tried to figure out who that answer might be, and hoping that it would jump out to me. And then, Emile, eventually it did. The second I looked at the numbers, the second I looked at who led the team in appearances, the second I looked at who was just there and available, there was only one answer.
Okay, I've not looked at the numbers, and I have two in mind. I'm between Busquets and Jordi Alba.
That was 1 and 2.
Yeah. Okay.
So I wanted to put PK because when PK was healthy, the back line was better and Barca were better. But I had to go with Sergio Busquets. He led the team with 50 appearances this year. He was the only Barcelona player to hit that mark, by the way, 50 appearances. He played 4,300 minutes behind only Ter Stegen's 4,300.
Crazy.
4,300 for Sergio Busquets. And he scored 3 uncharacteristic goals, that again don't matter. But especially when Xavi came, Busquets was not only locked in, but he deserved to be locked in, right? Under Koeman, there was an argument in the first half of that year when Barcelona were getting caught out on the counter over and over and over again. And they were creating chances, but there was no finishing product, or else the final ball didn't seem to be good enough. And you wondered where Busquets fit. But then when Barcelona started rolling, the 15-game unbeaten streak, and Xavi came in and you saw him start to implement parts of the system he wants to play. And then you were reminded how important Busquets is. Busquets, he was so consistent over the last 5 months, since those January transfer guys came. And then the other guy should be Alba. He played in 43 games and had 3 goals, 12 assists, and most importantly for him, found a way to be useful without his mate Messi, and kind of reminded people that the argument as to why Barcelona are saying, I guess we'll go for Marcos Alonso and kick this can down the road, hope Balde becomes good, because it's still Alba's position to lose. He is still the starter, and we cannot break the bank to try to compete for Alba because you're not going to get a guy that's going to compete. You're going to break a guy's confidence because you're going to have to bring in somebody to be a backup to him.
Yep. Agreed. I mean, Alba in particular is interesting because, you know, and I realize Twitter is not always the, the best place to sort of, take the temperature of anything. But yeah, there were so many people who, like get Alba out of my club types, particularly earlier in the season. And, I mean, I'll admit when he has a bad performance, it looks really bad, but he does so much and he is so genuinely committed to playing his position. And I mean, like he gives it all and he shows up as long as he's physically capable of playing a game, he shows up and he plays. And this season he played fantastically. And I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, I feel like of the players who featured regularly in the team, no one, I mean, by a long shot, I mean, maybe Busquets, but probably no one by a long shot probably felt more disoriented by the absence of Messi than Jordi Alba. And he found a way to be, just rock solid and, hugely productive.
Well, and it also kind of didn't matter who was in front of him, whether it was Ferran Torres on the left, whether it was Memphis, whether it was Dembele switching over, whether it was Ez Abde, whether it was Ansu Fati. He had a carousel of players in front of him on the left wing, and yet he still was pretty consistent. And defensively, I think more importantly even than offensively, where defensively he was exactly who he's always been, but unfortunately for him, it's always going to be the matches that he doesn't show up, quote unquote, doesn't show up in are just the most important ones. And I think, it's hard to forgive. And if you're out on Alba, you cannot possibly come back down, right? Like it's because he's only going to get older and we're only going to next season see consistently great performances, but we might see more poor performances. And actually the same way that we did with Dani Alves. Dani Alves had some good showings. He was really important when he seemed okay. And then the times he looked 39, boy, did he look 39. And that's what happened with Alba. And that's what happens with older players, where very much just like young players, that's the cycle, right? That when you're super young, consistency is difficult because you don't understand how to be a full professional game in a game. And then as your season winds down, as your career winds down, it gets harder and harder to show up each and every time, which again,
the physical limit, the physical limitations catch up with you. And it's like your brain is able to answer the bell every time, but your body just doesn't have the same tread on the tires anymore.
Especially with Alba at that period under Koeman, I believe, when he was dealing with a little bit of that hamstring injury, just it wasn't good for a few weeks there, but he was healthy and he was the only option. Again, Barca played with one left back this year. So speaking of I guess not speaking of the opposite of that, where Busquets and Alba, it's not really much room for them to improve. But most improved over the season, I'm interested to see what you have to say for this one.
Most improved is interesting because you have you can't call Gabi most improved because he didn't have a track record upon which to improve.
Well, I also am not sure if he quote unquote improved. Like he improved around the margins, around the edges. But I think the offseason and the preseason training are going to be huge for him. Like I would not be surprised if Gabi comes out even looking like a different player come the fall. I just, I think he played his way and deserved to be a starter. I'm not taking anything away from Gabi, but I don't think that his progress this year was linear. I think it was an entire year to adapt to first team football. And by the end of the year, he did look more comfortable. He looked more calm, which again, for a player like him, you don't want to neuter too much of what he does. But
exactly.
Just to see that. Yeah. So who's your pick?
Is it crazy to say Dembele?
It's not great to say Dembele. I put Dembele.
I'm going to go Dembele,
yeah. His 13 assists were second in the Liga, and he showed Kool-Aid's why. Well, he was brought in 5 years ago, but unfortunately, this wasn't 5 years ago. Finally, it was finally the season where it started to make sense for him. And he was arguably Xavi's most important player in that bid for second place. I actually think that Eric Garcia, this is just me doing this, I think Eric Garcia should be on this list. And he's 31, and I already mentioned him, but I think Luke de Jong should also be on this list. It feels weird saying a 31-year-old, but he was gone. He was gone. He was a
stat. I feel like that's not crazy to say.
Over, and yet he found a way to not only be a valuable piece, but Xavi trusted him off the bench in a specific role. So I think he improved his way over the course of a season into the Barca system, if you will. But are there any even other candidates other than who we just mentioned?
I mean,
it's an old squad, right? It's either an old squad or an older squad. So it's hard to.
You go through the young guys, right? You're like, okay, so there's Gabi, there's Pedri, there's, and like, there were moments where Pedri was somehow, even more, when he was healthy and just, at his, just at his healthiest and at his best, Pedri looked somehow more brilliant, or, just kind of an intensified version of the awesome player that we saw. I don't know that counts as most improved, but I do think, it was just signs of him growing into his this silly talent.
Well, I'm going to jump in because we're going to do one more, then we'll do MVP. Yeah. And as we discuss MVP, like I think the other candidates for most improved are obviously also the candidates for MVP. So next up is the opposite direction. It's most disappointing here. And there's definitely a bunch of candidates, and it definitely depends on how you viewed this, because I'll give you my takes first, and then you can kind of land on how you define this award, right? Mm-hmm. It's not really an award, but most disappointing. Because part of me wants to say Sergio Roberto. Mm-hmm. He played in just 12 matches this season, and every time it seemed like he was going to be healthy, he wasn't. And a reminder that he is not only the fourth captain, and I know that nobody wants Sergio Roberto around. I mean, truly. No, I mean, whether it's the Catalan journalists I follow, the Spanish reporters I follow, those pundits, just everybody's out on Sergio Roberto, even his own like Catalan defenders.
Yeah.
But to play 12, but for one of your four captains to play 12 matches this season, and the fact that Dani Alves really did have to come in as on his white horse to try to save that right side when Dest dealing with injuries. And even in the midfield, where you could have had Roberto put in some good shifts and good time, and it just never worked. Martin Braithwaite is actually, believe it or not, it's unfortunate for him. It's unlucky, but he's kind of a good candidate too, where he was brought in for way too much money. And it's unfair to him because a lot of these players that are quote unquote disappointing is because the squad has been mismanaged, and they probably, again, shouldn't be around. Roberto probably shouldn't still be around this year. Braithwaite probably shouldn't have been around. But, not counting goalkeepers, because I guess you can put Ter Stegen on this list.
Sure.
Not counting goalkeepers here, Umtiti, Braithwaite, and Balde all have the distinction of being named to more than 26 squads and played less than 7 matches. And that person who did that was Balde. So that means Martin Braithwaite and Umtiti played less than 7 matches and had 26 or more, named to the squad 26.
Yeah, they were on
And then Umtiti's 1 appearance in 29 chances is the absolute worst. But, I understand Ter Stegen, now counting goalkeepers, could be a candidate for this after a campaign where I think we all agree he needs to be pushed, and he no longer looks like the starter, even though he is. But changing the definition of the award, and I know you'll agree with me here, so I'm almost asking for 2. I'm almost asking for you to split this in half. I know you're going to agree with this, and then I want you to pick like one that's actually disappointing. But Sergio Aguero's situation was the most disappointing thing to happen once Messi didn't continue on. Yeah, that was, I think, a little bit of a gut punch.
Yep.
Where I mean, Ansu's injuries are definitely way up there, and maybe I'm kind of almost talking myself out of the Aguero situation. But Aguero was signed; he just made 5 appearances, scored his one and only goal, Clasico, and he really truly could have been answered. This is Sergio Aguero we're talking about. This is a legend of the game we're talking about. And he was just injured when he arrived and then forced into retirement in a heartbreaking way. So definitely his situation is the most disappointing, but yeah. So you can give me both answers there, Emile.
Yeah. So on the Aguero front, we talked about this. The preseason pod that we did, where I was in this very hotel that I'm speaking to you from, where I beamed and was, I'll call it guardedly giddy about Sergio Aguero coming to join Barca, and I thought it was going to be, I thought he would be a contributor. I didn't think he was going to be, vintage Kun Aguero, but just he's, like you said, a legend of the game. He knows how to finish in front of goal, and I thought he would be kind of a, just a very valuable contributor off the bench. So yes, I agree. I mean, his situation, I guess in tandem, I guess we'll say just in attack, the old and the young, kind of Sergio Aguero's situation was, like you said, it was heartbreaking and massively disappointing. And then there was also the overwhelming majority of Ansu Fati's season was just disappointing in the sense that we didn't get him. And, thankfully it ended on, on some beats of optimism and on an upswing. But, for a lot of it, just his situation, it has nothing to do with him and his play, but just his situation was disappointing. As far as an actual player whose on pitch performance was disappointing, I mean, you mentioned Umtiti, but I think the thing is, for us to call Umtiti disappointing, I would almost say disappointing as compared to what? I mean, because I don't think we came into this season with anything really in the way of expectations for him. I mean, he's for a while now, he's just been seen as this financial millstone around the club's neck. And if they can get, PSG to pay, anything above zero and just assume his wages, I mean, he'd be gone tomorrow. For that reason, I mean, I think it is Sergio Roberto, and just, it stinks, but I mean, he's, in terms of quality, in terms of availability, he just doesn't deliver at the level that is required. And I think that was true to a large extent when the club had, even greater ambitions than they do, was in trying to sort of rebuild its stature as one of the leading lights of the game. But I think especially now, as like you said, as one of the captains, as this Catalan veteran, and just a veteran of the club who knows the ins and outs, these are the moments too where his leadership and his know-how and his institutional knowledge need to be shining through and need to be, proving their value. And he's not on the pitch, and there doesn't seem any indication that, I don't know that he is delivering a lot, to the club.
I think
he's a legacy name. I mean, he's, that it's largely that he's Catalan and he's a legacy name.
Well, putting myself in the shoes of the people in the comment sections and my replies, I think Ter Stegen and Ferran Torres, if I just had to predict, I think those are going to be the two names you hear the most, believe it or not.
100%.
Because those are the ones who I think people have great expectations.
I imagine you'll get a lot of Sergio Roberto as well, but yeah.
Yeah, just because I think the 55 million euros at the place that the club is right now is just too much for any player. And I think Ferran Torres, unfortunately, is going to be living with that until other big money players return or come back in or are bought. And that might be a year or two even. We don't know where Barcelona the club is. And then Ter Stegen, of course, has got to be the guy. And he just didn't win games for Barca this year the way he did under Ernesto Valverde. And now it's been a few seasons. So those expectations are continuing.
Because it was like 3 years ago, he was arguably the top best keeper in the world, or
block, I think, and then Courtois was still up there at the time, but Courtois has ascended way beyond, and has been arguably the best goalkeeper. Okay, so the last category is MVP.
Yep,
and we have a hard time with this because you and I both follow the NBA, and you and I both understand that those postseason awards, the amount of games played matter. And it's so tough because the MVP is Pedri. Pedri is the MVP of FC Barcelona this year. His 4 goals, that's it, but it doesn't matter. He helped turn this season around. He was Barcelona's best player when they were at their best. And they qualified for the Champions League on the back of Pedri being their best player for a few weeks. And even though it was just 2 months and then he got hurt again, he did everything that this team needed. They just ascended to a new level with him in tow, even though it was just 21 matches. The other player we have yet to mention at all is Ronald Araujo. He played in just 42 matches, which is 8 less than Busquets. So I think that still qualifies. But he also played through a broken wrist or whatever that was, or sprain, whatever it was. I think it was a broken. Yeah, he had surgery, broken wrist. He also played through a concussion. I've said my piece about that. And he was dribbled past in single digits still. And there is still work to be done, as I mentioned about Ronald Araujo. He also was targeted as other teams, as in that loss to Cadiz, when they said, hey, if that guy can beat us on the ground with the ball, then we'll take the L. But he's not going to do that. And he didn't do that. So there were times when Barcelona fell by the sword and they were upset by teams worse than them because of some of Araujo's flaws. But there's definitely a good argument to be made that back line, especially when Piqué would go down or be out, that that back line could have completely fallen apart if not for Ronald Araujo, who also has an argument to be most improved, because I think he took another step forward this year especially in the air, on set pieces, just becoming one of the biggest dangers that Barca have had from set pieces in quite some time. So I think those who say Araujo, you have a very good argument. Those who say Pedri, I think, again, if not for we're splitting hairs because we're saying the number of matches he played, if we count that against him, then I'll give you the more difficult task. If we count those games against him and Pedri did not play enough to qualify for this award, if you will, who is the MVP?
Okay, so for me, Araujo and Pedri are sort of 2 and 2A, and Pedri's only not number one with a bullet because of, like you said, because of the time missed. I mean, if he'd played every game, I mean, it just, we'd spend 30 seconds on this and just kind of, just sing his praises for a while and go about our day. But so those two are my kind of 2 and 2A. For me, it's Busquets. I mean, just it's not thrilling. It's not, but he's like, I found an appreciation for Sergio Busquets because, I think no player exemplifies the 2 seasons of Barca in the 21-22 season more than Busquets, because I feel like during the under late period Koeman, it looked like Busquets was on his way out just as a top tier player, or, maybe he's not a starter anymore. Maybe he's not an every game starter. He didn't look like the world-class great that he is. And yet he was there. He was consistently there. And, under Xavi, I mean, clearly, those last days of Koeman clearly were just having an impact on everybody. And I think it was just such a drag on everyone, because Busquets was just such an anchor and such a rock for the team when, and especially Pedri was out, and, you have new guys coming in and attack, and, Ansu's out and Piqué gets hurt. And, there's all of this sort of, coming in, going out, injury and this and that. And he was the constant. And I mean,
he was captain too. A reminder too that Lionel Messi, the greatest player of all time, left. Yeah. And this Barcelona team truly could have even crumbled more than it did. Yeah. And even though you don't see his captaincy, there was something to be said about the fact that this club did bend this season, but they did not break. There were the bad moments, and there should be some credit to be given him. Yeah. I agree with you there.
He quietly sort of, I feel like he quietly calms the team. And I feel like you just kind of look at him and he never looks concerned. Like, he always looks assured in what he's doing, even if it's not going well. Like, he looks assured in what he's doing. Yeah. I mean, I feel like he was what this kind of young influx team needed. And I thought he was brilliant.